This tutorial is about installing seat belts in the 1929 Model A Standard Coupe. So on this coupe, we've already taken out the seats. You can see the front seat cushion and the seat back have been removed. Also, the rumble seat cushion and seat back have been removed. Now on the rumble seat, I've already installed seat belts. So I'm going to briefly show you how those go together. The belts in the rumble seat are standard seat belts about 70 to 80 inches long. And you're going to want to attach one end to this existing bolt hole on this vertical member, whose name I don't know. And then you'll do the same on the other side. And then in the middle, what you'll do is attach a piece of angle iron. I think this is a 1 inch, or it might be 3/4 inch angle iron. You'll have to measure carefully. You don't want it to be much wider than this little ridge here, but you also don't want it to be too narrow to get all of the fasteners into it. So about 1 inch is probably good. And you're going to use these existing holes, so these existing bolts. You can see there's a bolt here and here and then here, and these are all existing bolts. And what you do is take the existing bolts out, replace them with grade 5 or grade 8 bolts for additional strength. Take your angle iron and cut it to be slightly wider than the distance between these two bolts. You can see it's asymmetric. I didn't really do it very precisely. And then once you cut these and you're able to position the angle iron, you are then, before you install it, you're going to drill a hole in the right angle part of the angle iron for a nice big fat 1/2 inch bolt and nut to hold the seat belts. And then the two seat belts attach here in the middle. And what I recommend, because these seat belts are so long, you're really going to have a lot of excess length, particularly if you are attaching a car seat in here. And so what you can do is just wrap the end of the belt, the buckle end. So you can see the buckle ends right here. You just wrap it around this post several times, and that helps to shorten it. So that is what that's what we're doing in the rumble seat. Before we get started, I'm going to show you the tools that we're going to use here. I think these are all the tools I'm going to need. I hope. I might have a few extra that I end up using, but the goal here is to not do this install using anything that a normal person wouldn't have access to at a normal hardware store or on the internet for not a lot of money. So let's just go over very briefly what we've got here. Here we've got the seat belts, seatbelt 1, seatbelt 2, still in its bag. These are from Westco Performance, the 3.9 retractable passenger car belts. Next over here we have all of the nuts and bolts and washers that we're going to use. There's 3 groups. There's a group of 1/2 inch fasteners. These are the 1/2 inch washers, 1/2 inch nuts. We've got a 3/8 inch fasteners and then 1/4 inch fasteners. And what we're going to do with each of these is slightly different. The 1/2 inch ones are for the seatbelt connectors themselves. You can see this. All of these seatbelt connectors use the same 1/2 inch hole. And I will say that if you buy these from the manufacturer and you get their mounting hardware is 7/16 inch bolts, which is 1/16 of an inch narrower than 1/2 inch. But it does fit 1/2 inch, and I've done all 1/2 inch with this one. I don't know why. I don't know why they do that. The only explanation I can think of is if you're doing this on, not a 90-year-old car, but with a Mustang or Camaro or something, it's possible that the manufacturer's mounting hardware is 7/16, so you have to do that to be compatible. Anyway, for a car like this, we're going all 1/2 inch. The 3/8 inch fasteners are going to be used to replace the existing body bolt, which we're going to use for one of the connections, and then these 1/4" fasteners are going to be used to attach the shoulder belt, and I'll show you where that's going to go. But these are all grade 5 or grade 8 fasteners. You can use whatever you can find. I had a lot of trouble finding grade 8 for all of the stuff that I needed. There was usually not enough parts in the drawer at Home Depot. So you really only need grade 5. I went with grade 8 because it's just a few cents more expensive. A quick note on the length of the fasteners that we're using. So because my local hardware stores don't have very many of these fasteners, and I wasn't sure what length to use, I went and got a couple different lengths. So you'll see I have, for the 1/2" bolt, I've got a 1 inch, and this is a 1 1/4 length. What I found is that the 1 1/4 is probably best. I actually couldn't get enough of these, so I got some 1 inches to help out. But if you can get all 1 1/4 inch, I recommend that. The 3/8 inch, which replaces the body bolt, that is a 2 1/2 inch bolt. I believe that's the same as the original. And here for the 1/4 inches, I've got both a 1 inch. I think these are 1 inches. Yeah, these are 1 inches. I think that'll be fine. I thought about getting 1 1/4, but I don't think that'll be necessary. The 1 1/4 has a collar on it, so that didn't seem like what I needed. Anyway, so you got 1 inch, 2 1/2 inches, and 1 1/4, or 1 will probably work. This is a rotary tool, like a Dremel, and we also have some cutting wheels, and we also then have a set of cobalt drill bits because we're drilling through metal. And then lastly, we have these doodads. So this is sometimes called a Z bracket, sometimes called a double angle bracket. Has different names. You can see it's actually pretty hefty. This is probably 3/16 or 1/4 inch steel. It is not small and not easy to fit into small places. So these I got from Seatbelt Planet, and we've got 2 of them. I don't necessarily want to say that these are mandatory. You may be able to find an alternative connection method, but these are the ones that I use. You notice that they are angled. I would have preferred ones that were straight, but we've got ones that are angled was what they had, so that's what we're going with. All right, let me show you now how these are going to go in the car. The seatbelt that we're going to install in the front is this 3-point non-retractable seatbelt from Wesco Performance. So you can see that it has the 20-inch floppy buckle end for the bench seat. I've gotten it in blue to kind of go with the paint job. And then here's the end that's going to connect on your, if you're the driver, on your left hip. And then here's the end that's going to go up and connect at the shoulder mount. So there's 3 connection points that we need to worry about, and I'm just going to show you where those are going to go. So we're looking now at the driver's side of the coupe with the seats removed. This is the front seat riser. And this piece right here is the front seat back riser, I believe. And you'll notice that it has these 2 holes, one here and one over on the far side. And these holes are above a body bolt. Now I've removed the body bolt in preparation for doing this, but there's a 3/8 inch body bolt that goes down through there, and it's accessible both from here and if you are underneath the car, there's a place where you can reach your finger in to get at it from the inside. You can't get at it from the back here. This is solid and covers it up. So you'll need to both get at it from here and from underneath the car. Now what you're going to do here is, this hole is right now too small to get the mounting bracket into. The bracket itself needs to end up being oriented more or less like this, where the bottom end is over the 3/8 inch body bolt, and the top end is tilted and pointed toward the center of the car, and more or less flat, so that you can attach the 2-inch steel. So in order to do that, you're going to have to widen this hole. Now this is just sheet metal, it's not structural. You're not going to damage the car structurally in any way if you make this hole a little wider. But that is essentially what you need to do. You can see the hole in there where the 3/8 inch bolt is. And you just need to cut with your cutting tool to widen this hole until you can get the bracket into the proper position. Before we get this bracket installed, I want to show you guys exactly how this is going to go together. So you're going to have the bracket, and then on top of the bracket you're going to have the bolt and a fender washer. So this is a 3/8 fender washer. And then under the bracket you're going to have the body, sheet metal, and then the wooden body blocks, and then at the bottom the frame, the chassis of the car. And then underneath that you're going to have just a flat washer. This is a grade 8 flat washer, or you can use grade 5. Then you're going to have a lock washer. Then you're going to have the nut. One tool that I forgot to mention is a pair of safety glasses. You should always be wearing safety glasses when you're using power tools, and particularly when you are cutting or grinding metal. Always important. So, going to wear our safety glasses. And here we've got our rotary tool with the metal cutting disc attached. And here we've got the support bracket for the lap belt portions. So let's try to install those. All right, so here's the final result. You can see the bracket is in, cut cleanly off, it's secured down. Over on the other side of the car, there's the other bracket. So now we are ready to attach the iron. All right, and just to show you where we are underneath the car, here is the rear wheel and the radius rod from that. We're going to come up, and you can see here clearly the body blocks. And going under through the body blocks, here is our new grade 8 bolt with the nut, lock washer, and flat washer. And across on the other side is the other one. So there we go. What we've done now is just position the bar just by hand so that it is on top of the brackets and in the midpoint of the car. So you'll notice it doesn't quite go all the way to the end. If you wanted to have one that went all the way to the end, you could get a 48-inch piece of iron and just cut it to fit, but I don't think it's that important. It was 36 inches fit more or less, and then I don't have to make those cuts. So, and the other thing is that you want to position it so that it's centered pretty much over the bracket, and so that there is a gap between the angle iron, or between the iron and that rear seat back riser, so that they're not rubbing on each other as you drive. So once you've positioned the iron exactly in the place where you want it, then it's time to mark where you're going to drill. This is how we are doing the holes in the bars. You can see I've got the bar here. I've got it clamped down, and I'm just drilling through it at the spot that I marked with a 1/2-inch cobalt drill bit. All right, so we have drilled the extra holes for the seat belts. Got one here on the end, one in the dead center, and one on the other end. You may be able to see, I don't know if you can see, but the distances between the bracket and the end hole is slightly different on either end. That's a Model A for you. Also, I wanted to note that what we've got here, the sequence is bolt, washer, and then under here there's a flat washer, and then under here lock washer and nut. There is not a second flat washer under here. These size flat washers that I got, it's too wide. It runs into the bracket and it doesn't lay flat, so I just left that out. So you just got bracket, lock washer, and nut on each side. So I've just hand tightened those in case we need to make any changes. And now we can go ahead and attach the seatbelts. All right, we've got the buckle portions attached. So these buckles are attached to the middle portion of the bar. And the sequence I'm using here is just nut, seatbelt, washer, steel, washer, seatbelt, lock, nut, and lock, washer, and nut. So that's the sequence we've got here. And one thing to notice is that I've wrapped these around several times. I've also pointed the buckles to the side, because if you point them straight out, then you may run into the seat cushion. So I've wrapped the buckles around several times, and that's because you are, of course, right behind the seat cushion, so you don't need the 20 inches of buckle length that they give you. But if you just kind of smush it down in the seat cushion, then of course if there's a crash, it's all going to come loose. So what you want to do is wrap that around, and if you have not left a lot of room between the liner here like I have and the steel, then probably you'll want to wrap that around before you bolt everything down. But it seems to have worked pretty cleanly. These are a good length for coming up to the cushion. So next we'll put on the lap portion. All right, and here is a lap belt attachment right here on the end. Again, what I've done is nut, washer, steel, washer again, and then the buckle or the attachment, and then lock, washer, and nut. The bolt doesn't go quite all the way through the nut. This is one of those 1-inch bolts that I had to get because they were out of 1 1/4. So again, I recommend you getting 1 1/4, or your bolts will be slightly too short. One thing to notice is that I'm running the buckle under the belt of the steel and off to the side here toward the door. And the reason for that is that, you know, the force on the seatbelt is going to be up like this. And so this gives you the maximum amount of pressing on the steel to hold the buckle in place. You should also note, this is a non-retractable belt, and so I have positioned the adjustment clip here at the hip end instead of at the shoulder end, because the shoulder end is going to be way the heck back there, and you won't be able to adjust it. All right, so we've got our lap belts attached and our buckles attached. So now we're going to tackle the shoulder belts. For this purpose, I've moved the rumble seat cushion down into the space between the two seats, and we're going to lie on this and look up for the next portion. All right, so it's a little bit cramped, but here we are looking up at the bottom of the package tray and the panel above the deck lid. So ordinarily, if I'm looking over to the right here, ordinarily right here where these two bolts are, there would be a brace visible extending vertically down across the quarter panel to the base of the quarter panel where the sub rails are. That is a great place to attach the shoulder belt. It's nice and it's pretty reinforced as far as sheet metal goes. You can use some angle iron and kind of wrap your angle iron around the rear side to maximize the force you can put on it. So if you have those, I would recommend you use that. I don't have those. There's no good reason. I assume that someone who restored this in the past just didn't put it back on. So I don't have those. So what I'm going to do, and I guess if you're in the same pickle as I am, what you can do, we're going to use these two bolts and the same two bolts on the other side. And what we're gonna do is fabricate a couple of pieces of steel that we're going to use to make a mounting point. So what we're gonna do is take some smaller angle iron and make kind of an L-shaped bracket that goes through these bolts, and we're gonna replace these bolts with grade 8 bolts. Make an L-shaped bracket and another on the other side. And then we're gonna take a piece of flat steel, and it's going to go all the way from one L-shaped bracket all the way over here to the other one. And there's a bolt missing there. That's just because I took it out for testing. And so we're going to make a piece of steel that goes all the way across, ties those two brackets together. That should tie the two quarter panels together, and this panel above the deck lid. And the flat piece that we're going to do is also going to connect, it's going to touch right up against this piece of sheet metal, which is the package tray. So that should sort of bring as much sheet metal as possible into the job of supporting the shoulder belt. And that's pretty much the best we can do under the circumstances. The other thing that we're going to do, it's pretty hard to see here, but right up here you can see there is a gap in the sheet metal, and that brown material right there is the back of the cardboard. That is just the back of the passenger cabin. And what we're going to do is we'll ultimately position the shoulder belt mount point right here behind where this brown area is, and then we're going to punch through with just with an X-Acto knife or something, and that will allow us to route the shoulder belt directly through to this mount point without having to wind it around the package tray. So that'll give us the most direct mounting that we can. This was probably the most difficult part of the project so far. I made a lot of measurement errors that I had to go back and correct. So just be careful when you're doing this if you decide to go this way instead of using the vertical brace, which, as I mentioned, I don't have. So you can see here we've got an L-shaped bracket that's now connected to the two bolts that are connecting the quarter panel to whatever the name of this panel above the deck lid is. And then I've added a 3/8 inch hole here, which I'm going to use to connect the channel, or the flat steel that's going to go across to this one on the other side. The measurements were really tricky. There's a lot of weird angles and things like that, so be careful. But these are now in position, and I've taken my measurements, so I'm ready to drill the holes in the flat steel and hope they line up. Okay, here is the flat steel that we're going to be putting just behind the package tray in the trunk. And so this is a flat steel. This is 1.5 inches wide, 3/16 thick. Started off as 4 feet long, but I cut it to fit. I think it's about 43 inches now. And so if you look at each side, you'll find that I've got a 3/8 hole here, which is going to connect to the angle iron bracket that I attached to the quarter panel. And then just beyond that, I've got this seatbelt extender, which I'm using because the belts weren't quite long enough. You don't have to use this if you've got belts that are longer. It's just what I'm using. And I've got a 7/16 grade 8 bolt through that. So on the underside, it's bolt, lock washer, extender, flat steel, flat washer, nut. And the reason that, and you're actually looking toward the front, so the way that these will work is they'll be looped over here, and then this will go through into the cabin. And the reason that I'm doing it kind of backwards this way with the, you can see this is kind of on the underside and it's actually pointing toward the back of the car, is because there isn't actually room to have it pointing this way. So this flat steel is going to be, this edge is going to be snugged right up against the back of the package tray all the way along to give it additional strength and stability. And because of that, I don't actually have room for the extender to be poking out here. It just didn't work. So instead, I'm looping it over the back, so then it's going to come forward at a slightly higher point and connect into the cabin. Your mileage may vary. This may not be a problem for you, but in my case, this was how I did it. And I will say, if you're using kind of conventional seatbelt extenders, see how this is bent here. You really will want to make sure you use 1.5 inch steel or less, because this bend, it's hard to see, but this bend is happening right at the point where it's coming to the edge of the steel. So if this had been any wider, that bend would have intersected with the steel, and that would have been bad, or I would have had to place the hole off center. As it is, I placed the hole in the center. That also gave me more flexibility as far as whether this is pointing to the back or the front. So 1.5 inches worked really well here for me. So let's go ahead now that we've got this assembled, and we'll try to put it in the car. All right, the flat steel assembly has been installed. Here you can see pretty much all the bolts that are necessary for this part. 2 replacing the 2 bolts that connect the rear quarter panel and the panel above the deck lid, and those connect to this angle iron, which then has a 3/8 inch, those are 1/4 inch, and this is a 3/8 inch bolt connecting to this 1.5 inch flat steel, and then beyond that there is a 7/16 inch bolt which connects to the seatbelt extender, and that, for space reasons, loops up and around and over and goes through the cardboard into the cabin. And now you see how this comes in inside the car. So you can see I've got the extender bolt coming through just a cut that I made with an X-Acto knife in the cardboard, and then it bolts to the seatbelt itself. And I should add that you may not need an extender bolt or a seatbelt extender, but it did help in this case to have one, because it helped to be able to attach something in the cabin and then push it in the trunk and then push it forward into the cabin, rather than attaching something and having something in the cabin and bring it back and have to attach it in the trunk in a confined space. So it bolts here to the main seatbelt, which comes over and connects to the lap belts that we set up previously. Now, one thing I want to call attention to is right at the buckle, right where the seatbelt buckles, just above the buckle, I've placed this metal clip. This is the Seatbelt Extender Pros Frankie, that's just the name, Frankie seatbelt adjuster clip. And I'm sure there are other clips on the market that do the same thing, but this one worked fine. What this does is it just clips onto the belt and essentially prevents the buckle part from sliding up and down the belt. And it also prevents the belt from sliding through the buckle. The purpose of the clip is to act as a fail-safe. We know that the shoulder belt is not attached to the vehicle quite as firmly as the lap belt portion, so it's possible that that would fail prematurely and come loose in the event of a crash. If that happened and the clip weren't there, if the shoulder belt mount point failed, the shoulder belt would come loose and the belt as a whole would slide through the buckle as the belt came loose, and your body would just move forward unobstructed. But with the clip in position above the buckle, as the buckle tries to slide, it'll be stopped by the clip. And then the lap belt, the buckle mount here and on the other side, will take up the force and keep you belted in as if you were wearing a lap belt. Now, of course, your torso will still swing forward, but it's better than all of you moving forward or all of you moving out the door. So that's the reason to put these in, just as a fail-safe in case the shoulder mount point were to come loose in the event of a crash. So here is the final product. I hope you've enjoyed this video. There are 2 caveats that I want to leave you with at the end here. The first is that this car was restored in the 80s, and as you've seen, there were changes made. So I can't be sure that what's true on my car will be true on your car. Your bench seat may have different positioning or different parts, or be in a different spot. Your seat back riser may be in a different spot, all those kinds of things. So just be aware of that. When you're looking at this and looking at your own car, you may just need to use this for inspiration and draw your own kind of solution to your own particular setup. The second thing is that I am not an engineer.
I am not an expert in seatbelts. I'm not an expert in car safety. So there should be no assumption that I know what I'm doing, and nor should anyone that you pass this car along to be under any assumption that you know what you're doing. I recommend that you, after you put your seatbelts in, if you're going to sell the car, you should consider drawing up a waiver so that the person who's buying it confirms that they know that you put these in, they were not installed by the manufacturer, there's no warranty, there's no promise that they will work in a crash or prevent injury, etc., etc. Certainly, I would not make any such warranty with these. I've never tested them in a crash. I do not know whether they'll work. But having said that, I hope that you got something out of this and that you enjoy this video and it's able to help you. Thank you.